The Colorado River is out of balance, and that's been the case for at least 20 years. We've seen the supply in the river declining.
Experts say that we're in a crisis.
Between 2 and 4 million acre-feet of additional conservation is needed just to protect critical levels in 2023.
The 7 states sharing the Colorado River were supposed to come up with a plan to conserve water. The deadline came and went this week without any real solutions.
It's now time to take much more dramatic action to remedy the situation and get it back into balance.
The history of how the Colorado River is governed goes back to 1922, when the 7 basin states came together and divvied up the river. And they basically said the upper basin states gets 7.5 million acre feet, the lower basin states also get 7.5 million acre feet. And so throughout much of the 20th century, what's been now called the Law of the River has been developed, which builds upon that 1922 compact to allocate water to the states in the US and the states in Mexico. And so that's what we're dealing with today is further interpretation, further development of the Law of the River to figure out how do we do those state allocations responding to drought, responding to climate change, responding to low reservoir levels.
At nearly 190,000 acres, the East Troublesome Fire is the second largest in Colorado history. Its flames now fatal.
A historic amount of fire growth in the state of Colorado. An amazing amount of terrain has been eaten up by this fire. Hundreds of people have been evacuated. We know that homes have been lost around Grand Lake, between Granby and Grand Lake.
Perhaps the hardest hit was here at Willow Creek Reservoir. This is a reservoir that captures water that drains in the Willow Creek River Basin. This is water that will end up in the Colorado Big Thompson project and being delivered to more than 1 million residents of northern Colorado and 615,000 acres of irrigated agriculture. And about 90% of the basin was damaged by the fire. In the days and weeks that followed the entrance of fire into the Grand Lake community, we were able to get more of we were able to observe how the fire had affected the surrounding watershed. And we recognized that this would be an issue for us for years to come. Because as the forests were, in many cases, destroyed from the landscape, we recognized that that would alter the quantity and quality of the water that would be going into the Colorado Big Thompson project. And so you can see on the hillside, it's greened up, but you can still see the remnants of the fire because unfortunately, fire does a lot of things. In addition to burning the trees, it also can kill the soil and bake it basically to create an impermeable barrier for water. As the raindrops hit that soil, it dislodges the ash, the sediment, and also a lot of debris. But then you put billions of raindrops together and it causes real problems. So the East Troublesome Fire ended up burning about 193,000 acres. Unfortunately, there are many, many hundreds of thousands of more acres in the watersheds of the rivers that contribute to Colorado's water profile. And so we know that we will be recovering from this fire for generations, but also likely having to deal with future fires as they occur.
So here on the Front Range, our cities and farms do receive a significant amount of Colorado River water. So with that, knowing that that water has been taken out of the Colorado River Basin and brought to the Front Range where it does not return back to the Colorado River Basin, our communities really have to think through how to use that water efficiently.
We're at the WaterWise demonstration garden, or Xeriscape demonstration garden for Colorado Springs Utilities, where we showcase what you can do with a limited water supply and still have a beautiful landscape. Landscapes is a great place for people to reduce their water use, and we like to show how they can still have a beautiful landscape while reducing that water. So we live in an area that oftentimes is under a drought, or we have higher temperatures, limited rainfall for extended periods of time. In fact, in the West, we're in what's been considered about a 20-year drought. So we know we have to change how we view our landscapes, and we need to create an environment that uses a lot less water. And that's what our garden is really focused on. How can we demonstrate to customers what they can do with less water? So in the future, we might not have the ability to water 3 days a week. We might need to limit the water that we're using outside. And if that happens, we want people to still have a resilient landscape that looks beautiful.
So right here where all this rock is, there's some sprinkler systems set up, like the tubing and everything I had run. But after we went to the Xeriscape place, looked around, decided like, let's just do rock. It's way simpler. I don't have to mow anymore, which is what I really like. It's pretty low maintenance other than digging and putting in new plants, but I mean, it just takes care of itself now. So it's kind of nice.
As a community that's in the West, it's important that we are really respectful with the water that we're using. And these landscapes are great demonstrations on what you can do that uses less water, that as a customer is going to help you save money. And as that city in the West, it's helping us stretch the supply that's available even further. So these landscapes add tremendous value locally, but they also help us support this larger infrastructure that we're really a part of, which is anybody who relies on the Colorado River for water.
Palisade is just this magic little place, and there's probably maybe an 8 square mile of excellent peach production. We get, because we're fairly high elevation, the hot days, cool nights, makes the fruit sweeter. Our whole operation is about 120 acres, and we've been here about 30 years. It's increasingly stressful. 2 years ago, our water master said to consider irrigating everything as much as we could the end of August, because there was a good chance that we were going to have our water shut off. And fortunately, we got quite a bit of rain right at the end of the season, and so that bailed us out. But it's been increasingly it's worrisome. I think people are going to have to decide whether they want a lawn or if they want to eat, and it's going to get pretty pointed pretty soon. Is there just not enough water to do both?
So this is the main canal. I was up here last week and there was just a little bit of water in it, and now it's just about, completely dried up. Poor things. Yeah, there's a lot of fish in here. More so than in the past. Yeah, it makes you sad. Yeah, they don't have much of a future. Our farm was purchased by my granddad in 1930, and so we're going on 92 years. Eventually, maybe if we can make it, we'll be a centennial farm. We're excited about that. We typically grow cotton and alfalfa. This year we tried growing some barley, and we have no cotton in the ground because of our drought. We should get 8 to 10 cuttings a year, and that's a 4th cutting. And after the canal has been shut down now, And so we have no more water coming to us. All of our hay was cut last week, and we just don't, know what the future holds for us right now.
We used to have, that was a dairy barn, and our old cattle pens, we had a dairy at another location then later, and we had beef cattle in here. And now we're gonna have a freeway. They're gonna take from that barn, the backside of that barn, all the way across through the farm. Well, things that I see happening, and I think anybody else that's paying attention sees it, is that, the irrigated acreage in Arizona is shrinking.
These growers know that we're growing in the desert. We're in a drought. I think farms use like 80% of the water in Arizona. And with everything expanding, the municipalities, cities getting bigger, more people moving here, it's definitely starting to hit home. It's an issue that I think we need to tackle on all fronts in order to really solve it. But I think starting on a farm where we're using 80% of the water is probably a very important first step. We are standing on Colorado River Indian Tribe ground, the Crit Farms in Parker, Arizona. We're working out here. We've got a USDA grant to convert flood irrigation into an efficient drip irrigation. That this is a system that can work, that can provide the water to grow any crop in the desert, keeping up with the ET demand throughout the season. So we're maintaining it.
We're trying to grow just a very small area of cotton, 16 rows. We just decide, we're calling it optimism. It's our field of optimism. The day that they turned off the canals, I was out driving down and the levels were going down. I burst into tears. It hurts to see your livelihood drying up. And this farm means so much to me. And we just have to be optimistic, thinking this drought, we've got to come out of it.
I think the draw that this lake and this body of water brings in from a tourist standpoint is huge. I know everyone says the same thing because water is important everywhere you go. Does it have to be full? No, but a nice, good, solid body of water is crucial. Enough to play on, enough for boats, enough for people camping to come fishing on the banks. And it's huge for this community, no doubt.
That stack means we're not clearing it.
Well, if we're open for 5 months and we have to shut down for 1.5 months, it's a big chunk of the season.
Yeah. And it's for us as business owners, but also the community, this lake and the people that come out here, bring a lot to this whole valley. And so it was heartbreaking to think that this whole thing was going to be shut down, because it would have impacted us, obviously, but it would have impacted a lot of people, from guides to hotels to gas stations, you name it. So we were able to salvage a piece of it by getting this open. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to function 2 marinas on the largest body of water in Colorado. It's just we all have to make the adjustments that need to be made. So if this is the new norm, to continue to operate this. Our season may be a 1.5 months. We're hoping through Labor Day weekend, but we also, if they do an emergency release call, that we may be shut down, early. We'll just have to go with it.
My whole life for the last 42 years has been the resort and the marinas. And so they sold the resort, so now they're down to the marinas, and it's kind of like my last child I can stop by and see.
It's been a pretty epic situation for growing up in this business. And And there's been some fun times, you know, really fun times on this lake, and that's just me. I know that every boat here and every person that comes to visit has those types of memories that I hope generations to come are able to have.
The water is it's the lifeblood of everybody, not just river people. And so that's, you know, and that's kind of cool, you know, so we have that in common. I mean, I'd be in the grocery store, or I'd be walking down the street, and somebody will come up and they'll go, "Jose, what's the river doing?" And they have nothing to do with the river. They just want to know, you know. It's in everybody's DNA. Recreational use is non-consumptive, so we don't own it, but we use it. That's a two-edged sword. The first part is we live down here, so the environment is kind of part of our it's part of our DNA. But by the same token, no water, no recreation, no money, you know, so that's the other catch. So we're not blind to the fact that there's, you know, we need development, we need all these things, and we need crops. We're not blind to that, but we also know that there is a thing here that needs our protection.
Last year and the year before last, like 2019 was pretty low. But you know, it's interesting. People are like, hear about the drought and they're like, "Oh, is there water? You know, are you guys gonna run?" And it just changed how we operate.
If the river does something, then we adapt. So we're more like fish. We're more like geese, you know. And if the water's low, we go to paddle boats. We go to smaller boats. We have motors, you know. And we motor down the flat water because there's not enough time to do the trips. We adapt, you know. When I talk to Grand Canyon boatmen, I feel privileged. You know, they're struggling to keep their beaches, and we see them come and we see them go, you know, and sometimes we don't know why. You know, our relationship with the river is more visceral, you know, it's more real. This part of the Colorado is very natural. It floods and it doesn't flood, you know, it goes down, you know, yeah, the river is a living thing. Here, it's nature, you know, and nature doesn't make sense all the time.
But on this side, it looks pretty dramatic in this bay area because, you know, the terrain just slopes up. So like 10 feet of level makes it look like a lot. Yeah, visually it looks like it's really empty almost, you know. I mean, we were about to where this beach was at a couple of years ago. And that was my favorite beach to go to. I grew up here in Page, Arizona, and also on the reservation about 20 miles south of here. Been around Page my whole life, Lake Powell, swimming, you know, fishing here my whole life. Yeah, water levels has come down quite a bit. Again, this year was the lowest it's ever been. But so, you know, of course, you know, there's water here. You know, you definitely can be out. This was all dry at one point, you know, and that was pretty beautiful at some point too, you know. But we have water in it, so that's still a good thing. So.
For those of us that are here, obviously you see we have a front row seat. Many of us live here because of Lake Powell, and so we're highly in tune with what's going on with that lake. I mean, it's a beautiful, magical place. I mean, water in those Red Rock Canyons is incredible, but yeah, compared to, it's just a ghost of what it used to be.
This is a very good topographical map of Lake Powell. Of course, it's a lot lower now. We're at 26% capacity, which is really low. You can see the bathtub ring. That's where the water used to be, so that's about 150 foot down. Our spillways are exposed. You can see how far down they are. I worked on the lake as a boat mechanic, boat pilot, and then I started as a utility man here, which was a janitor, and became an operation apprentice. Then I was an operator for a few years, and then I went into a senior operator. The love of the lake kept us here. I mean, this was done in the 60s. It just amazes me. We've decreased generation. We're only down to running around 4 units right now. We used to be at 165 megawatts per unit. Now we're down to about 90. So roughly about 50% of where we used to be. Well, I've seen it at the minimum power pole. This year we went 3 feet below that. But since May, when we were at 3424, we've come up 14 feet. So we're had a decent water year. Could it be better? Yeah.
And it comes through here, and it turns that turbine that you see laying up on the dam, and then it falls straight down into here.
The much bigger impact is, of course, as there's less flow, less water coming down the Colorado, of course, there's less energy being generated. Energy is a fundamental building block for everything we do. If you start down the avenue of making it scarce or expensive, we just simply can't compete in a global market. But you know, as that resources dwindle, you know, so is our access to that.
So you see the orange gates down there? There's 24 of them that go around and open and shut them openings on the runner. The water's going around that runner, making it spin, and it goes up and it connects to the rotor upstairs and starts producing the power.
The water level has drifted down to a point that wasn't really foreseen initially by the designers of the Colorado River Basin. The 40 million people that need the water from the Colorado River, everybody's going to have to push some across the table till we get through this drought.
We have no running water, so we had the hot water every day. We used to have a lot of rain when my dad and my mother lived on this earth. Now it's pretty hot, so the sheet loves to drain a lot of water. It takes a lot of water. Maybe 2 days a week, something like that.
You don't see running water that much. It's hard living wise, you know. All environments involved. You know, every person here uses water. Animals use water, plants use water, insects use water. Water is life, everybody's life. See, we just live one day at a time.
1922, that was the first time that the management plan for the Colorado River Basin was passed or started. In 1924, tribes were first recognized as United States citizens. So we were not included in the original plan when they first talked about the Colorado River Basin. So this Colorado River Basin supplies water to 40 million people, 7 states, 2 countries, and 30 tribes. And for us to come up with this process of equity and trying to give everybody their water right is going to be a challenge. And in the lower basin, they've also came up with a plan last year called the 500 plus plan. So tribes have some water that's quantified, and they put it toward the reservoir itself to bring it up so it still produces power. They're asking the upper basin tribes to do the same, similar to that, to bring the reservoir of Lake Powell up so that can also keep producing power. But we can't do that and be obligated to do that, even though the federal government's asking us to. We need to first, as sovereign nations, as tribes, to quantify our water rights first. Right now we have water that's owned by the tribes that haven't been quantified. And we've been working with the different states on how to quantify that.
What we see here is 42-inch steel pipe, and it's a portion of
what we refer to as the San Juan Lateral. It's a pipeline that's going to run from Waterflow, New Mexico, down through the Navajo Reservation and down to Gallup, the city of Gallup, New Mexico, and also their surrounding Navajo communities. We have a large portion of the Navajo communities that don't have water. They have to haul water to their communities, or they have really a low quality source of groundwater. So this project really is about improving the health and the quality of life for the Navajo communities, as well as you can imagine, you really can't have any commercial, development, any economic development without clean water. So schools, hospitals, just residential development, stores, retail, all of that really needs clean water. You have to have it. So that is really the purpose of this, and it's exciting. So the city of Gallup has seen their levels of water deplete drastically within their aquifer. So there is a real and substantial concern that eventually that water source isn't going to be there. So this is also to supplement their water source and improve their, other people's lives and development, their opportunities. Yeah, I think we take for granted, most of us, we turn on our sink and we have really clean water. It has chlorine residual in it. It's been treated to remove all sorts of bacteria, right? And the groundwater system just doesn't have that. And just your health in general, really what comes down to really clean water, which is just the basis of life.
The Colorado River is a pretty amazing thing, right? It's almost an entity to itself.
So the challenges are immense, but also the opportunity, I think, is generational and historic. If the Bureau of Reclamation is saying we need 2 to 4 million acre feet of additional conservation, that's an opportunity to really rethink how we prioritize our use of this river. And it's a way for us to think about what are our values today in 2022, and how do we want those values reflected in how we manage the Colorado River. The Colorado River was originally divided up in 1922. I think 100 years later in 2022, it's time that we update the river for how it reflects, and the river management for how it reflects our values today.
It means a lot to a lot of people, and that's the challenge, because now we all have to take some actions to really constrain and kind of recalibrate how much we can ask of this river.